Hello, everyone. It's Charlene Lee, and I'm excited today to be talking about autonomous agents. These are artificial intelligence agents that use the large language models behind things like ChatGPT to be able to do things on your behalf. So, we've always had agents around now, these artificial agents. You probably know the one that's in your phone. Siri, we have Alexa, where we can say to it, hey, tell me what the weather is. But these agents aren't that intelligent. Actually, they're very specific, task oriented. They do just one task really well. They set a timer. That's what I use Siri mostly for, to set a timer. So I don't have to get on my phone and do a bunch of manipulations with my finger on the screen. I can just say set a timer for 10 minutes. These AI agents are very different though, and they are so new. They are just not even a month old. Things I'll talk about some of them, but they are using things like ChatGPT primarily to be able to do complex tasks. And I'll give an example of one that I recently put into one of these agents, and I'll show you what it actually does. And the thing about these agents is that they are doing these complex tests without you having to be at the keyboard. So the thing about ChatGPT, if you've had a chance to play with it, is that you can go in and start playing with it and give it a task like, show me everything there is to know about um, rainbows. And, or actually, I'll give you the example. My son is planning a trip to New Zealand. And he's like, what are some classic itineraries for budget backpacking? And you could do that in ChatGPT. And the next thing you say, well, what are the places I should stay in hostels? And how do I get from one place to another? But you have to be at the keyboard and giving those instructions to a search engine or to ChatGPT each time. Autonomous agents actually do all of those things for you in one simple way. So the idea here behind an agent is that I'll just show one example of this. So this is the idea. This is the trip that I wanted to do. This is the exact prompt that I put in. Plan a trip to New Zealand, end up in Boston, and then create itinerary and find hostels to stay at. And so I'll come back to this to say that's the exact command I put into the automatic autonomous agent. In particular, I put into a couple different ones, but they all do something similar in that they break down these complex tasks into subtasks and then execute on them without you having to be there. The equivalent of this is the idea that you are sitting there's a person sitting next to you at a keyboard, like a human, and you just tell them that exact prompt that I gave, and they would just go at it. And in this case, though, it's actually the AI and actually another agent that is sitting there instructing that artificial intelligence on what to do. So what is an agent in the end? It's a system that understands the context and the environment of the request. It then makes decisions and takes action to achieve that very specific goal that you're trying to achieve. And very importantly, it goes back and takes additional action. It rationalizes and says, well, that wasn't such a good thing. The thing that I came up with in the end, that changes some of the other things I had to think about, or there's some additional things that I hadn't thought about. And I'll go give an example of how this AI in particular did a great job of that. So why do you need an agent? Well, if you have been playing with ChatGPT, you realize that it's not connected to the internet. It's not connected to all these tools. It can't go and look for flights. It can't tell me in real time information what is going on. So it needs another thing to go and do those searches for it, and then comes back and makes sense of that information. It also can't access my personal information. So if I wanted to go check my frequent flyer miles to see if it makes sense to book on United with my miles versus buying it, it can't access that. But with an agent, it potentially could using various APIs. And the thing is that the thing that's really different now is that it's able to we can use AI to actually break down the task and then run itself. So I would love for you to share if you could have some sort of complex task, what would you want an AI agent to do for you? And so, what I want to do today is give you an example of what some of those things are. Just to give you some context, these are the names of some of the agents that I've been playing with. And I'll put them into the chat too, as well, so that you can have them available inside of your uh, live streams, and you'll be able to see it there too as well. So the idea here is that the AutoGPT and BabyAGI are the ones that I think are most out there, but they're really hard to use because you have to have programming, you have to have open API keys and stuff. So I've been using Godmotes.space and Cognisys.ai. And the example I'll show you today comes from Cognisys. It just produces the content in a little bit cleaner way so that you can actually see it and use it. So let me give you an idea of what it actually looks like. So I'm going to go back and show some of the examples I had here. So again, this is the example that I had, which was to book a trip to New Zealand and to be able to go from San Francisco to Auckland. So it's giving me the dates roughly of when I want my son to go. And it has to figure out that you actually don't arrive there on May 1st, you actually arrive on May 2nd. And to arrive in Boston on May 16th, you actually have to leave on the 15th or even the 16th. So little tricky things like that it has to figure out. So I want to show you, oh my goodness, it's so hard to read actually now that I realize it. I apologize for that, but this is what happens when you're in dark mode. So what happened here is that it actually broke down the tasks into 3 different tasks. And so the first thing it did was retrieve options to fly from San Francisco to Auckland. So returning to Boston before May 17th. And it based on the requirements of found me flights, flight 1, 2, number 3. And then it went on to go and look at the second task, which was to gather information on budget-friendly hostels. So it gave hostels in Auckland and Queensland for the stay. And then the third thing it did, and this was really interesting to see too as well, it then put together an itinerary, and I actually copied it and put it into here. So it gives a pretty interesting itinerary saying these are the places to go. It took its previous recommendations of which hostels to stay at least in Auckland and Queenstown, incorporated that into the itinerary, and then put together all of these things to do. But this is the thing that was really interesting. It then said, well, this isn't enough just to give you this, because it would just stop here because we just completed the 3 tasks that identified. What was really interesting is it then identified 3 more tasks to do. It said, well, you have this itinerary, but you need to book transportation from Auckland to this national park. You need to get from Wellington to another national park and get from that park to Queenstown. So I was really impressed by this because not only did the agent go and do the 3 tasks that I set out, it also identified additional tasks that I had not asked it specifically to do, but it rationalized that if you want to do this itinerary, you need to know how to get back and forth, especially if you are a backpacker. You can't just drive. So it then goes on and gives examples. Again, you'll see me cutting and pasting it here. There's a bus or a shuttle for the first trip. On the second trip, this is what you want to do. And then the third, and it also tells you how long it takes to get there, how much it is. And then the third trip, they get to Queenstown. There is bus, car rentals, and private shuttles that you can take. So this was pretty darn impressive. And I'll if you want to get the slides, you can also get them here on my site, charlene.com/AI-agents. So this is pretty darn impressive from my point of view. So the thing here is that this is a little bit different. And to Crystal's point, aren't we already using AI on social media? Yes, we are using a lot of artificial intelligence. But the difference between these autonomous AI agents is that they're taking a task and breaking it down in such a way that you can't program this. So a lot of the AI that's being used in social media to show you the feeds, for example, are already pre-programmed against a particular algorithm that makes judgments on what's important, what isn't, based on the information that's in there. But these agents are actually much more flexible, and they're able to take commands and requests and these complex tasks that you want to do, and then put them into and break them down, as you saw, first of all, into a very specific, into more discrete tasks. So again, what I first originally put into there was this. Let me try to get back into this. Here we go. This is the original task that I did: book a trip, create itinerary, find hostels. And normally I would have had to sit there at the keyboard and do all of this. But this autonomous agent, again, it's the autonomous part that's interesting, was able to do that entire task more or less. It's not great. It didn't actually book all the flights for me and everything, but it got me the information. And but it did all those tasks and identified something else that I hadn't explicitly asked for. So this is what I kind of think about, that the reason why I'm so fascinated about this is I believe that given the pace of development, in a year's time, we are going to have agents working on our behalf. We can set a very complex task. And in the beginning, you're going to have to be more explicit about it. You're going to have to break down the tasks in as great detail as possible, but you will be able to have these tools that will actually execute on these things. So I mentioned last week that the bane of my existence is my CRM, my customer relationship management, my contact database. I really should be logging all of my calls with clients, with people I'm doing research with, and I should be taking notes on each of those conversations. And I really just want an agent here that I've invited into the conversation. The people on the phone know it, on the call with me know it. It's taking notes, summarizing the notes for me, enters it into my CRM, and reminds me that I need to do something with that information based on the content of that conversation. That would be great. It would just remove so much of the admin work that I have to do and sit there and do. And that's pretty simple. And then I can just query the agent and says, hey, pull up the last 10 conversations and summarize them around this topic. And I'll be able to do that versus me having to go through all the notes and tediously pull everything together. So that's one of the things that I would love to be able to see agents to do. And I would love for you to share some of the things that you would like to see. I see some comments here. So let me get to some of these. So Mark says, would the evolution of general AI tools and app creation be similar to what happened with the App Store and the iPhone revolution? Yes, absolutely. And one of the things I'll talk about, not next week, but the week after probably, are some of the ChatGPT uh, APIs that are available now. So what they've done is created an API protocol that you can create something called a manifest as a tool provider. So, for example, Kayak has written an API that says, hey, ChatGPT, when you come and use and query the Kayak database, this is what you can ask and this is what you can get. You can ask for flights to locations and it'll give you the flights to locations. And you can book hotels. You can do a lot of things. So, one of the databases that the agent that I used was looking at was Kayak. It looked at Google Flights. So it's able to query those things thanks to these APIs. And so right now, you have to know how to set up an API, have a key to OpenAI to be able to set that up. But I can do it. I know a little bit of technology, but it's fairly straightforward and easy to do because the API is using natural language and these large language models to be able to query that database. So it's interesting to see how this becomes a platform, how these large language models like ChatGPT are becoming large language models that people can build on top of. So the fact is that the Apple Store, the App Store, really took off. The iPhone really took off when the App Store was there. You can see the richness of that ecosystem, and that is exactly what's happening. That is what allowed these autonomous agents to come up because in early March, ChatGPT set up its API. And then people started writing against those. And then someone said, hey, I can actually have an agent be able to query all these APIs in very specific order and keep track of everything. So Marissa has a question here. The infancy of AI was available even in a simplified form of saved Google keyword searches, emailing us daily 15 years ago. For example, new pages showing the program search word or phrase. Absolutely. But remember, we had to program it. These autonomous agents will now say, hey, I see you're working on this task. I know the way you work. Your next action is probably going to be to go and look at those saved keywords. I've actually saved those searches already for you. Here they are. I remember working with a researcher when I was at Forrester, and she was the best research associate ever because I would literally walk up to her desk and go, I was thinking that we should do XYZ. She goes, Oh, I was thinking the same thing. I already started on it. Here you go. And she could anticipate the things that we would be looking at. She would produce it and then give me something that was a great first draft. That was fantastic. And to be able to have the prospect of someone like her working in this way, anticipating the things and the information that I would need, and even looking around the corners like that AI did and saying, how are you going to get from one place to the other if you're backpacking? Uh, it's incredible what these agents can do because it's no longer constrained to just the commands that you put into it. So let's see. We have Jay coming here saying, beginning with GPS, are we creating AI that eliminates the challenges associated with travel that enhance our skill repertoire? If the challenges are eliminated, are we missing a key element of learning? Well, Jay, I don't know if I remember a day when I used to have a travel agent, literally a real person as a travel agent, and I could just call her and say, I'm going to New Zealand. Can you book me flights? These are the constraints. Can you create an itinerary for me and find places for me to stay? And she would take care of all of that. I miss those days. And so I could still learn a lot. I can choose to do these things manually because I enjoy putting together plans, or I can choose to use an agent and be able to do that. So, and I'll talk about this next because the most important thing about being able to use these agents is again, I think the thing about AI isn't that it does all the work for you, it's a different skill set now. And that you need to know how to query it. You need to know how to ask it the key questions. And so with these agents, it becomes even more important that we be able to know how to ask questions, especially now when these agents aren't that great. They still need a lot of hand holding. So the way you explain a complex task, especially as it's learning what these tools can, these APIs can do. It's learning about you. It's learning about your context environment. It's still, you're going to have to still be really good at it. But I do believe that these agents are going to be so good that in the future, I can give as simple a command as what I said to it and plan everything for me. It'll also know that I really like jumping off of high places and book me a lot of bungee jumping off of those bridges in New Zealand. And it will also book me some great cultural experiences because these are the things that I have done in my previous trips. Because access to all my previous itineraries and activities, it knows what I like. And that'll be a very different itinerary than for somebody else who really just wants to sit on a mountaintop and enjoy the beautiful vistas of New Zealand. So a couple other things comes. We have Robert saying, "I love this. Augmentation is the vision of computing pioneers like Alan Kay." Absolutely, this is about augmenting us as humans, taking away some of the things. I do believe that it's going to make us rise to a higher level of humanity in order for us to be able to use these tools well in an ethical, responsible way. And I'll talk about that a little bit end of today and then also next week too as well. Robert goes on to say, I would love to analyze the dialogue of our inside sales reps to provide coaching and support. You know, what's interesting is this is possible absolutely right now. We have these tools that can plug into video conference calls, into phone calls that analyze the content of the conversation. For example, how much are you talking versus listening? What language are you using? Are there certain words that you are using that convey confidence or that could be construed as biased, especially in recruiting conversations? Are you using masculine or feminine words to describe things, and are you using them in various conversations with men or women differently? So again, I think a lot of the work is that the groundwork is being laid in these natural language processing technologies that are out there, now married with these large language models and the ability to use the GPT, the transformer technology, to create new content that we're able to use and absorb, and making it so much more accessible than it has been in the past. Okay, so Jay says, I've traveled extensively overseas and learned more from my mistakes and unintended consequences. One of the interesting things about this trip for my son, he may have all of this, but as you know, the best laid plans fall away. And so, even though you can have these plans put together, they never go as you planned. And so, he's going to go off on this adventure on his own, make new friends, figure out that the buses are on strike, have to get from one place to the other, figure out that the hostel is full, or he made a reservation and they can't find it and it's full, he's gonna have to find another place. I'm sure those adventures and those missteps and these things that go wrong are going to absolutely still happen. So, the reality is that it can take away so much of the planning, and my son said it was okay for me to share this with folks. He's terrible at planning. He does not have strong executive function skills. So being able to use a tool like GPT to be able to do the heavy lifting so that you can actually go to places like New Zealand, which otherwise the planning and things like that would have been really difficult to do, is a really good gift. Similarly, he has dyslexia, so writing, the actual structuring of writing, is really difficult. The writing itself isn't. He has the ideas, he has the words, but putting into a structure, the 3 paragraph essay, 5 pages, these kinds of things, it takes him a really long, really, really long time and gets in the way of the actual expression of the ideas. So using tools like GPT, where you can express those ideas, put them into structure, and then have it create a first draft using his words, is a tremendous gift. So that's what, and Jay also has this quote, to quote Mark Twain, good judgment comes from experience and experience comes from bad judgment. Great quote. Thank you for reminding us this, in that in the end, these tools are only as good as the humans who put the content and the questions into them. So, deep breath. I do want to share some of the tools that are available to try this. I think I put them into some of the comments here already. Yes, I put them into there. Let me put in also where you can find the slides and the examples into the comments here, so you can pull those two out as well. Again, I encourage you to start playing with some of these tools. Again, godmode.space and cognises.ai are the two tools that I think are most user friendly at this point. So I think those are the ones that are probably the best ones that you can use. And I'll just put those out there again. A couple things about the two ones that have made the most news, AutoGPT and BabyAGI. BabyAGI is an interesting name. It's artificial general intelligence. And the question for a lot of AI scientists and thinkers and philosophers is, are we on the verge of general intelligence? Meaning that here is an entity that can answer any question that you put into, similar to how a human can answer any question. And especially with all of these databases and platforms available now through the APIs, it truly becomes a general intelligence that you can have. So artificial general intelligence, and it's not quite there yet, which is why they gave it the nickname the baby AGI. AutoGPT is just simply that, is how can you just automatically query GPT from OpenAI and be able to ask it to put together a plan, reason out this is the link thinking behind the plan, you approve it, and then it'll actually critique the plan and keep going forward with it. So, a couple of things to do with this is that these agents are doing 3 things that's really different. They're auto prompting. They're taking these complex tasks and then breaking into subtasks and putting them into an order that says, this is what you can do first, second, and third, because I need the information in the first one to do the second task, to do the third task. And it'll actually just take you through those tasks. It has access to all of the tools, so it can do a search, for example, in Bing or in Bard. It has the GPT plugins. And the third part is that it improves on itself, as you saw with that example, looking for ways to get from one place to the other. So a couple takeaways. First, These AI agents are basically GPT, Chat GPT on steroids. And the thing that amazes me is that this has happened within the past month. I believe that AutoGPT came out on March 25th or 26th or so. BabyAGI just came out right after that. So we're not even a month into this. And we're already seeing second and third iteration generations of these agents being evolved. It is happening so quickly. I feel like I wake up in the morning, my hair is on fire, like, oh my gosh, what's happened overnight? So the thing I would encourage you to do is to try these agents, especially if you're curious of what they do. Take a complex task, break it into subtasks, and put together the prompts and specify the tools, the APIs that you wanted to query. And so this practice gives you that early mover advantage to be able to say, okay, I'm playing with this, and also saying, how complex can I be? How simple can I actually push this task to be without having to break it into subtasks? And that's where I think these agents are getting better at learning to discern what is the underlying meaning behind each of these complex tasks. And then I would say, if you're feeling up to it, start playing with some of the Chat GPT plugins. I'll do a session deeper into how these plugins work in about 2 weeks. But some of the easiest ones are the ones that you can put into your browser so you can easily access it, be able to use and search on, to be able to access search and GPT at the same time. So there are some very simple web-based plugins that don't require they'd be able to go in and use these tools. So one of the key things that I encourage us to think about is, if we could have these agents do anything, what are the use cases that we would want? What are the things that, if you could have an agent do anything you wanted to do, what would you want it to do? And start experimenting with these tools, because we're only limited by our imagination. And right now, our imagination is fairly constrained because we're used to this query called search, and being able to go into search and ask a simple task and then having to piece it together. If we take away that constraint and we have an agent sitting on our side that can work on our behalf, what would we want it to do? And very importantly, also, what are the limitations of what we want it to do? I remember going through when the person who developed Baby AGI was talking about how they built it. One person asked, "How do you get it to stop? How does it know when to stop and not keep going on these tasks? Because it could potentially start hallucinating. So where do you want to have dinner? All these other things I could think about. It needs to stop and check in and say, is this what you're looking for? Is this good enough? Would you like me to take it in a different direction?" So these agents also need to know how to stop. So us as humans knowing what to ask it, how to constrain it, what's responsible, and what's safe is a key question for us to ponder. And so that leads me to what we'll be talking about next week. I want to talk about what organizations must do to stay safe. And what I mean by stay safe is, what are the questions and things you need to be thinking about? I keep going to these events, and these very excited leaders in business and communities and organizations keep asking, so what do I do now? You're talking about what it can do. What do I do? What should I be doing first, second, and third? And the advice coming back is just play with it. Well, I want to give some more structure to that. How do you actually think about using tools like ChatGPT inside of your organization? And I'll be giving some examples of what organizations are already starting to do, and how you can really take advantage and use these things in your organization, but also what you need to think about, the questions you have to ask, the policies and the principles and the governance you need to put in place to make it sure that you and your organization and your people are staying safe with this. So that's what I have for today. I think there's one last comment. Let me see if I can squeeze it in. Yes, Jay has a beautiful comment here. Trust is key. So, how do we develop trust with this AI? Do we trust it with the work that we're giving it? How do we trust that the results are coming back? And how do we be very careful? Because it's not always right. The information you're getting out of these AI tools are not always right. So, we'll talk about all these things next week. Thank you for joining me today, and I will talk to you next week. In the meantime, I hope you get a chance to try some of these autonomous agents. As always, I would love to hear from you. Please reach out to me, share with me your experiences, and I will talk to you next week. Take care.